I realized that most Christians that I met were much quicker to throw salt on my wound whenever, I fell, rather than to pick me up and encourage me. And I started to think back of all the pastors that I ever criticized that screwed up sexually or whatever they screwed up. And then if you got to know them and you realized their fears and what would happen if they shared, their burden with someone at their church, instead of finding someone that they can, slowly seek out reconciliation with, they would lose their job and lose their benefits, and they're thinking about their wife and their kids. And I actually had 2 youth pastors growing up. The first one was right down the street from my house, and he got stung. He thought he was talking to a 15-year-old girl, and it was the FBI. And so it was the youth pastor that I served under, and bam, he's done for. And I mean, big press, big lights, and what sucks about that is, as he got arrested and they cuffed him, they had all these video cameras, and it was like ABC Nightline News kind of junk, and he just ducked his head and he said, "It's finished." And so people crucified him for that. They're like, "You're trying to, talk about Jesus whenever you just got caught." And that's just what we do. That's our pattern. As soon as we get caught, we become very, sympathetic for the things that we've done and how we've hurt people. But I believed him, not then, now, because I got to talk to him since then. Or what he told me is, he's like, "My wife got pregnant and she was really moody and I couldn't be intimate with her." And so I just, after about 3 months of that, I just found, little ways to do it. And it just kind of turned into this huge snowball that no one could stop. And he said, the few times I tried to hint at the conversation, I'd get shut down, but he would speak in very hypothetical terms. So he's like, "I have this friend that this and that," and these religious folks would be like, "Well, they need to be feathered and tarred, and dragged out to the edge of town," as an example. And so he was so deathly afraid that his fears came true, but in a very different way. And so I got to sit down and talk to him, and it just really messed with me, because the day I found out that happened, I was outside of my house in South Louisiana. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I was 17 years old, didn't have shoes on, no shirt on, it was so hot. And I'm walking up and down my sidewalk, and I'm like, God, because I used to think pastors were a big deal. I used to think, you have to be called and chosen, and you can't just go to school and have enough money to get a degree to become a pastor. And I wanted to be one, and so I was like, God, how can this guy do this? You gave him a position, and he just goes after this little girl. This is ridiculous. And as I'm just tearing this guy apart through my righteous prayer, I feel like the Pharisees saying, "Thank God I'm not like this tax collector." And the tax collector can't even look up to heaven, he's so ashamed. He just beats his chest and says, the tax collector's prayer is honored. But I just remembered, I felt like God told me the only difference between the two of you is you haven't got caught yet. And it just ripped my insides apart for about 2 days, until I forgot about, that prayer and just kind of got back in my cycle. 2 years later, I served at a church, and this one pastor sleeps with 4 of his girls, the youth pastor. And I'm just I started to see this pattern. And it's funny, because my animosity toward it was my animosity towards me. It wasn't towards these people, because I realized they are me. And so I would go months without it, and then inevitably something would happen. I'd go to a bar tour and see a girl in a bra or whatever, and immediately my mind would go somewhere else, which is so uncharacteristic of my heart. My mind would just, boom, go out the window. And I spent most of my time, on the streets, and as I began to get the stories of these prostitutes, and I'd meet these broken women that, their chest is hanging out because their clothes have been worn so long that the fabric just keeps getting stressed and stretched, and you just become so heartbroken and so, disgusted by where your mind could have gone when you first saw them, as opposed to, getting to the heart of the matter. And I finally read Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers, which is such a chick book, but it's fantastic. And it's a modern day representation of Hosea and Gomer, and how God had, the prophet Hosea marry a prostitute and remain faithful when she wouldn't, to show that this is Israel. You keep going and basically screwing other gods, and I keep buying you back once you become locked up. And it's amazing, because Michael Hosea, the main character, his brother-in-law sleeps with his wife, all these people, and he's just so merciful to them. And his brother-in-law's, "But you don't understand what she made me do to her, and who she is, and she's a soiled dove, and she's a whore." And he's like, "No, she's a daughter that never had a father, and she was sold into slavery at 8. And that changes real quick your perspective of these people whenever you realize their past, you know. And so whenever we're trying to forget about our past, you know, so that we can feel better with ourselves, what we do is we forget that other people have past, and that's the last thing that we do is go and try to like investigate why there's pain, why there's hurt in their lives, and we just attack it. Because if we can continue attacking their pain, it'll distract us from our own. And that's what I did for years and years and years until about 6 months ago. Red-handed thought, everyone's like, you're done. No one's gonna listen to you. These pastors started writing blogs to, you know, like, I guess boycott me. And they're like, we knew there was a catch. You know, we knew that there was something going on with him, which there's something going on with all of us, to be quite honest. And so I write my note. I'm like, this is what happened. I don't want you to throw stones at me because I'm already pretty beat up. But I feel free for the first time. And that's whenever it clicked. Whenever, you know, Johnny said it's finished.
Just simply put, it's like this. It's like coming in out of the rain. God is the house. The rain is the world. We can't blame God for all the things that are going on outside of that covering. It's our choice whether we walk underneath that covering or not. What does that mean? It means being real. It means being transparent. Even if it means people are going to laugh at you and they're going to abandon you, and that's okay, because the truth of the matter is this, is that the bride of Christ is sick. She's very sick. She's full of judgment and backbiting. You know, in the very phrase or in the very paragraph that Paul was talking about sexual sin and all that other stuff, he mentioned backbiting and gossips and a whole lot of other things, and judgment and other things like that the church is living in that cesspool. It means being transparent, even if it means that you're going to have a lot of people turn away from you. Because what's going to happen is that God's grace and mercy is going to show through your healing and through your deliverance, and it might help set them free from their religion. I'm here to tell you right now, I personally struggle with pornography, and I have to keep guard all the time. I have to read the Word every single day. I have to keep my spirit man built up every single day, because the slightest little thing, and then sexual thoughts are going to enter in, and then I'm going to go down a path that I regret going down. But I've learned something. I've learned that my struggle with pornography was a matter of spiritual maturity, and the more that I grew in the Lord, the less struggle that I had with it. It wasn't about me having this moment of deliverance or anything like that. It was actually walking through my healing. When I realized that, every time that I fell, the devil would want to try to come condemn me. I'd say, it's a matter of spiritual maturity. You just need to sit down and shut up. My flesh is eventually going to starve, and my spirit man's eventually going to get to the point where it's bigger than my flesh, and it's going to be in control. But I want to lay that out there before you right now, for you guys and girls that are struggling with sexual thoughts. You got to embrace your struggle right where you're at. You got to embrace your struggle right where you're at.